You don't stumble into a name like Omalhavien. You feel it before you understand it. It has that strange effect certain words have, like they were designed to bypass your intellect and touch something older in you, something that recognizes patterns in the dark. And that's exactly why this matters. Because the moment a mysterious name grips your attention, your mind starts doing what it always does when it senses meaning. It searches. It fills gaps. It constructs a story. So before your curiosity becomes your conclusion, let's slow down and do this properly. Omalhavien isn't presented in old ceremonial texts as a cute myth or a poetic metaphor. It shows up more like a coordinate, like a label on a hidden map. Not just a spirit name floating in the air, but a name tied to time itself, to an hour, to a specific threshold of night. And if that sounds dramatic, good. Night is dramatic. Night changes you. The same person you are at noon is not the person you are when the sun has set and the world gets quiet enough for you to hear yourself. Think about it. Why do certain realizations only arrive at night? Why do some fears grow teeth after sunset? Why do some truths finally speak when the day stops demanding performance? There is a psychological reason, and there is also an old spiritual grammar that has tried to describe this for centuries. Omalhavien lives at the intersection of both. Here's the promise. By the end of this, you will know what Omalhavien is in its original context, why a system like planetary hours treats time as alive, and how to use this idea in a modern, grounded way, without superstition and without giving your power away. Because the real danger is not the name. The real danger is what people do when they want meaning so badly they stop thinking. Hold that tension with me. A real name from an old system. A living concept of time. And a threshold in the night that can become either a trap or a doorway, depending on how awake you are. Let's start with the part nobody tells you. The reason names like Omalhavien feel magnetic has less to do with magic and more to do with the way your mind is built. Your brain is when something is unfamiliar but structured, it triggers a very specific kind of attention. It feels important. It feels coded. It feels like it belongs to a hidden order you're supposed to decode. And that sensation is powerful, because it's the same sensation you get right before insight. There's also another layer. When a name is connected to tradition, especially something old, formal, and obscure, your mind assigns it authority. Even if you don't believe in spirits, you can still feel the weight of a system that claims it as classified reality. That's why grimoires fascinate people, not because everyone wants to summon something, but because part of us longs for a universe that is organized, meaningful, and responsive. Now add night to the equation. At night, your external inputs drop, your nervous system shifts, your imagination becomes louder, your memories become more accessible, your intuition gets room to speak, and your anxieties also get room to expand. Night is a magnifier. So when you meet a name set to govern an hour of the night, it doesn't land as trivia. It lands like a mirror. You start wondering whether the hour itself has always been different, whether you've felt it before without having words for it. This is where discernment matters. In modern pagan and Wiccan philosophy, you don't surrender your mind to a claim just because it's mystical. You test. You experience. You stay sovereign. A high priestess doesn't ask you to stop thinking. She asks you to become precise about what you feel, what you notice, and what changes when you pay attention. So here's the hook you're going to carry into the next part. If Omalhavien is not a random word, but a coordinate in a time map, then the real question becomes this. What kind of map is planetary hours? And why did people build a system where time itself has rulers, textures, and doors? Omalhavien makes more sense. The moment you stop treating it like a personality and start treating it like a function. In the Pauline current of ceremonial magic, especially the Ars Paulina, the world is organized through correspondences, hours, directions, zodiacal degrees, and the intelligences assigned to them. Think of it as an old metaphysical interface. You do not open it by believing harder. You open it by understanding where you are on the map. That is the key difference between a popular angel name and a Pauline name. A popular angel name floats around as inspiration. A Pauline name is pinned to a coordinate. Omalhavien is tied to the first hour of the night, the threshold after sunset, the moment the day seals itself and the night begins to rule. That ceasing. The hour is not an empty container. It has an identity, it has a signature, and the name marks that signature. To a modern seeker, especially one drawn to the grounded current of Wicca, this doesn't need to be taken as a literal bureaucracy of invisible beings. You can understand it as something both older and more useful, a way of noticing that time has moods. The first hour of night does not feel like the third. The first hour is a doorway. The world is still warm from the day, but the psychology of night has already started. Your attention turns inward. Your body shifts. Your social mask loosens. You become more honest, sometimes more tender, sometimes more raw. This is where the High Priestess lens protects you. A name like Omalhavien can become a superstition if you use it to outsource your power, but it becomes a tool if you use it to locate yourself. Not who is Omalhavien in the fantasy sense, but what does the first hour of night reveal in me, reliably, when I meet it with intention. And now we can't avoid the next step. If Omalhavien is pinned to an hour, the next question is unavoidable. What exactly is an hour in this tradition? Because planetary hours are not your clock's hours. They bend and breathe with the seasons. And once you understand that, you'll understand why this system feels so alive and why the night has doors that modern timekeeping forgot how to name. Here's where your whole relationship with time can change, because the planetary hour system refuses to pretend that every hour is the same. Modern time is flat. 60 minutes is 60 minutes, no matter what the sky is doing. But the older astrological view treats daylight and darkness like living substances. Time stretches when the sun lingers. Time tightens when the night dominates. And you can feel that in your body even if you've never studied astrology once in your life. In planetary hours, the day is counted from sunrise to sunset, then the night from sunset to the next sunrise. Each of those arcs is divided into 12 equal parts. That means the length of an hour changes constantly through the year. A summer daytime hour is longer. A winter daytime hour is shorter. The night hours do the opposite. You're not following a machine. You're following the breath of the seasons. This is why the system feels like nature is speaking. Wiccan philosophy leans into that instinct. The sacred isn't abstract. It's seasonal, cyclical, embodied. When you stop measuring your life only with fixed units and start noticing time through light, you begin to experience something we almost lost. You begin to feel when your energy naturally rises, when it naturally softens, when you're built for action, and when you're built for reflection. That is not superstition. That is self-knowledge synchronized with the world. Then comes the pattern that gives planetary hours their inner rhythm. The 7 classical planets rotate through the hours in the Chaldean order: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, repeating again and again. It's a sequence that creates an energetic texture, like chords cycling through a song. And the planet that rules the first hour after sunrise sets the tone for the whole day. That's why the days of the week carry planetary names. It's not branding, it's an old cosmology stamped into language. So when the Ars Paulina assigns names like Omalhavien to specific hours, it is working inside this living clock. It's saying, this hour is not only measured, It is characterized. It has a quality you can enter. And if you want to work with it, you don't just pick a random time because you feel like it. You choose a threshold because thresholds actually do something to you. Now, here's the hook you need to carry forward. If planetary hours make time alive, and Omalhavien marks the first hour of night, then the real question becomes psychological and spiritual at the same time. What is so special about that first hour after sunset? Why does it hit people so hard? Why does it change the way you think, feel, and perceive? The first hour after sunset is not just darker daylight. It is a shift of jurisdiction inside your nervous system. During the day, your attention is outward. You manage tasks, signals, other people's expectations. Even when you think you're relaxed, part of you is still performing. But when the sun goes down, something ancient in you recognizes it. Your body begins to reallocate resources. Your senses sharpen differently. Your mind stops scanning the world for goals and starts scanning your inner life for meaning. That's why this hour can feel charged. It is a liminal space, and liminal spaces amplify whatever is real. If you've been avoiding a truth, it will try to find you here. If you've been carrying grief under productivity, it can rise like a tide. If you've been longing for direction, you may suddenly hear a quiet answer that was drowned out all day. People call it intuition, or anxiety, or spiritual sensitivity, depending on the story they like best. But the experience is consistent. The first hour of night changes the conversation inside you. Now connect that to the Pauline frame. A name like Omalhavien becomes a ritual way of saying, this hour has a recognizable signature. This transition is not random. Treat it with respect. And respect, in a modern pagan sense, is not fear. It's presence. It's choosing to be awake for your own life. In Wicca, you are not meant to be helpless before unseen forces. You are meant to be in relationship with the cycles. You learn the difference between fantasy and signal. You learn to observe without spiraling. So instead of turning Omalhavien into a dramatic external being you're supposed to appease, you can hold it as a name for a nightly gate, a moment where your psyche is more permeable and therefore more honest. Here's the practical power in that. If you approach this hour unconsciously, it can become a trap. Rumination grows teeth, insecurity gains momentum, and you mistake intensity for truth. But if you approach it deliberately, it becomes a doorway. You can process the day without numbing. You can make sense of what you felt. You can recover parts of yourself you left behind in survival mode. And this is where the strategy shifts from explanation to experience. Because the next step is not learning more facts. The next step is learning a new posture. A high priestess posture. Grounded, curious, sovereign, not summoning, not begging, not dramatizing. Simply entering the first hour of night with intention and noticing what it always reveals. In the next topic, I'll translate Omalhavien into a modern Wiccan framework that honors the tradition without getting lost in it. And I'll show you how to work with the concept safely, in a way that builds clarity instead of dependence. Here is the translation that keeps the soul of the old system without turning it into superstition. Omalhavien is not a boss in the sky you must obey. It is a ritual name for a threshold you can choose to enter with awareness. In modern Wicca, the sacred is not proved by spectacle. It is recognized by relationship with the body, with the land, with the cycles, with the honest movements of your own mind. That is why this can be approached as a practice of self-knowledge instead of a performance of belief. Think of the first hour of night as a natural temple, not a building, a condition. It is the moment the world visually softens and the inner world becomes more audible. In that temple, the goal is not to contact something external to make your life easier. The goal is to contact what is already true, so your life becomes clearer. You do not need to summon. You do not need to fear. You need to notice. This is where a high priestess voice matters, because it draws a boundary. If any teaching makes you feel desperate, chosen, threatens, or dependent. It is not wisdom. It is manipulation. A clean spiritual path strengthens discernment. It makes you harder to control, not easier. So we take Omalhavien as a symbol that protects your sovereignty. It reminds you that certain hours are more psychologically open, and therefore you must be more intentional about what you feed your mind, what you replay, and what you invite into your attention. Now bring in the modern lineage of pagan self-development. Writers like Scott Cunningham emphasized simple, personal practice rooted in nature and lived experience. Phyllis Kurochi's work highlights autonomy, ethical power, and spirituality that heals rather than binds. Women's spirituality scholarship insists that the inner life is not secondary. It is a source of knowledge. When you place Omalhavien inside that framework, the name becomes a doorway into nightly self-listening, not a chain to an external authority. So, the Wiccan way to hold it is this: the first hour of night is a time to return to yourself and to the natural world at the same moment. To remember you are an animal of cycles, not a machine of deadlines. To ask, without drama, what did today teach me? What did I avoid? What do I actually need? Where did I betray my own truth to keep the peace? What part of me is asking to be seen? And notice what happened just now. A single name became a mirror. That is the safest magic. The kind that does not inflate you, does not scare you, does not promise shortcuts. It simply makes you more honest. Next, I'll give you the core practice. The hour as mirror. One simple nightly rite of attention you can do for 7 nights that will create measurable changes in your clarity, your emotional regulation, and your intuition without requiring you to believe in anything you cannot verify. This is the hour as mirror practice, and it works because it doesn't ask you to escape reality. It asks you to enter it more fully. You begin in the first hour after sunset. Not because the clock says it is special, but because your body already knows it is different. The light has changed. The day's noise has receded. The inner voice that gets interrupted all day can finally finish a sentence. Create a small boundary, not a dramatic ritual. A clear signal to your nervous system. One light source, dim and steady. One seat you return to for 7 nights. One decision that, for a short time, you will not multitask. You are teaching your attention that this hour belongs to you, not to your feed, not to your stress loop, not to other people's urgency. Begin with breath, slow enough that you can feel your ribs expand. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench. Then name the threshold in your own words. You can say Omalhavien quietly if you want, not as an incantation, as a label. The way you might label a chapter in a book so you can remember where you are. This is how you keep it grounded. A name for a state of time, a state of mind. Then you ask one question, the same question every night, because consistency is how you separate signal from mood. Ask it in plain language, like a friend who wants the truth. What am I not admitting about today? Do not force an answer. Notice what appears first. The first response is often the performance. The second response is often the truth. Now, you write not a diary, a record. 3 sentences only. The first sentence is a fact from the day. The second sentence is what you felt underneath that fact. The third sentence is what you needed but did not ask for. Keep it sharp, no storytelling, no self. This is not confession. This is data. Then you close the practice with a single act of alignment. One choice for tomorrow that honors what you just learned. Small, real. If the truth is that you are depleted, the act is rest. If the truth is that you avoided a conversation, the act is one honest message. If the truth is that you abandon your body, the act is a walk, water, food, sleep. This is where spirituality becomes strategy. A ritual that does not change your behavior is just decoration. Do this for 7 nights and you will notice a pattern. Not a supernatural pattern, your pattern. You will see what your mind repeats when the sun disappears. You will see what your heart tries to say when the world stops distracting you. That is the gift of the first hour of night. It reveals what is there, whether you look or not. When you choose to look, you stop being haunted by vague feelings and you start being guided by clear information. Next, we weave the planetary thread in a way that stays useful. How to match different kinds of inner work to different planetary qualities without getting lost in complexity, and how that makes the Omalhavien hour even more potent as a weekly rhythm. Now we attach the planetary thread, but we keep it clean and practical. The moment people hear planetary hours, they either dismiss it as fantasy or they drown in details. We do neither. We use it the way a modern Wiccan practitioner would use any correspondence system, as a way to focus attention, shape intention, and build a rhythm that your psyche can recognize. Here's the simple idea. Different parts of you respond to different kinds of support. There are hours when your energy wants structure, hours when it wants courage, hours when it wants tenderness. The ancient system names those textures with the 7 classical planets, not because planets are puppeteers, but because symbolic language helps you aim your mind. And when your mind is aimed, your life becomes less scattered. So imagine the first hour of night as your nightly threshold, your place of truth. Then you overlay a weekly rhythm, so that threshold has a theme. You are not asking the universe for permission. You are training your inner world with consistency. Saturn nights are for boundaries and responsibility. The question becomes, where am I leaking energy? What must I stop tolerating? What structure would make my life kinder? Saturn is not punishment. Saturn is the relief of a clean line. Jupiter nights are for meaning and growth. The question becomes, what am I learning? Where can I expand without betraying my values? What belief about myself needs to be upgraded because it is too small? Mars nights are for courage and truth. The question becomes, what am I avoiding because I am afraid of conflict? Where do I need to act instead of think? What would I do if I trusted my own strength? Sun nights are for identity and vitality. The question becomes, where did I dim myself today? What makes me feel alive? What part of my day belonged to me, not to proving something? Venus nights are for love, harmony, and self. The question becomes, where did I accept less than I deserve? What does gentle connection look like when it is honest? How do I treat myself when no one is watching? Mercury nights are for clarity and communication. The question becomes, what do I need to say? What decision am I over? What is the simplest true sentence here? Moon nights are for emotion, intuition, and memory. The question becomes, what am I feeling that I have not named? What does my body know? What old story is trying to run the night? Notice what just happened. The system became a language for inner work. That is the modern, grounded application. You can use an app or calculator if you want to find precise planetary hours for your location, but you do not need precision to benefit from the principle. Rhythm creates depth, theme creates focus. Focus creates change. And this is where Omalhavien becomes more than a mysterious word. It becomes the name you give to your commitment to meet yourself at the first hour of night, then to meet a different part of yourself depending on what you are ready to heal, strengthen, or understand. Next, we confront the shadow trap, the way people use occult systems to escape responsibility, romanticize suffering, or chase validation. And then we flip it into integration. So the work makes you steadier, not weirder. Here is the shadow trap, and I want you to recognize it immediately, because it shows up in every spiritual path that touches mystery. When a system feels powerful, people start using it to avoid the one thing that would actually change their life: responsibility. They treat symbols like substitutes for decisions. They chase signs the way some people chase approval. And the moment you do that, you are no longer practicing spirituality. You are practicing dependence. With names like Omalhavien, the trap is seductive. It gives you a story that feels special. It can make your emotions feel like prophecies. It can turn a bad night into a message, and a stressful season into fate. That can be intoxicating because it relieves you of the hard work of asking simpler questions. Am I sleeping enough? Am I safe? Am I honest? Am I ignoring what I already know? A modern Wiccan approach is not it is It treats the unseen as something you approach with respect and boundaries, not hunger and obsession. Your power is not proved by how strange your experiences are. Your power is proved by how stable you become, how compassionate you become, how clearly you can choose. So here's the correction that keeps the path clean. If the first hour of night amplifies your inner life, then the goal is not to amplify it further. The goal is to interpret it better, to separate instinct from impulse, to separate intuition from anxiety, to separate genuine symbolism from the brain's tendency to create meaning when it feels uncertain. This is where your practice becomes protective. When you sit in that first hour, you do not ask, "What does this mean about the universe?" You ask, "What does this reveal about me?" Because when you start with yourself, you don't get lost. You don't become prey to every coincidence. You don't give your authority away to a mood, and you will feel the difference instantly. The dependent version of spirituality makes you tense and needy. The sovereign version makes you calm and precise. The dependent version creates urgency. The sovereign version creates clarity. The dependent version makes you chase. The sovereign version makes you listen. Now let's turn this into integration, because this is where the magic stops being aesthetic and starts being real. Omalhavien becomes a deliberate cue. When night begins, I return to myself. I do not indulge my spirals. I do not romanticize my pain. I witness what arises, I record what matters, and I choose one small act of alignment. That is how night becomes medicine instead of a stage for your fears. Next, we close the loop with the transformation arc and the open promise for the next video. What changes after 7 nights? What most people notice first? And how to build this into a series that keeps viewers coming back, because it is not just interesting, it is useful. If you do this for 7 nights, something quiet but undeniable starts to happen. You stop being surprised by yourself. You start noticing your inner patterns before they hijack you. You recognize the moment your mind tries to replay the same argument, the same regret, the same fear, and instead of falling into it, you can say, "I know this doorway. I know what this hour does. I know what I need to do with it." The first change most people notice is emotional clarity. Not happiness, clarity. The ability to name what you feel without drowning in it. The second change is a strange kind of strength. When you meet yourself honestly at the same hour each night, you stop needing constant reassurance during the day. The third change is intuition that feels cleaner. Not dramatic flashes, but steady knowing. You begin to tell the difference between a true inner signal and a noise pattern fueled by exhaustion. This is why the name matters. Omalhavien becomes a marker, a boundary in time that says, "This is where I return to myself." And when you return consistently, you begin to repair the relationship you have with your own attention. You stop treating your mind like an enemy and start treating it like an instrument you can tune. So here's how I would close this video in a way that lands, transforms, and also pulls the viewer forward. I would invite them into a simple experiment, because experiments create ownership. Belief creates arguments. Ownership creates change. I would say, take the first hour after sunset for 7 nights. 3 sentences, 1 question, 1 small act of alignment. Do not try to impress anyone. Do not try to summon anything. Just notice what becomes obvious when you stop running. Then I would open a loop that feels irresistible. Because once someone tries this for even 2 nights, they will want interpretation. They'll want context. They'll want to know if what they're experiencing is normal. That is where your next video becomes inevitable, not optional. The next video can be the first tower gate in practice. What people typically experience in that first hour of night across the week, why certain emotions intensify on certain days, and how to interpret signs without. We can even explore how the planetary qualities shift the tone without turning it into a complicated system. It becomes a guide for modern seekers who want mystery but also want sanity. And here is the last piece, the High Priestess seal. You do not need permission to work with time consciously. You do not need to be chosen. You only need to be present. The first hour of night arrives every day. The question is whether you will use it to numb, to spiral, or to wake up. This is where we end it in a way that feels like closure and like an opening at the same time. Because with a name like Omalhavien, the temptation is to end on mystery. But the deeper ending is responsibility. Mystery can entertain you for a night. Responsibility can change your life. So I would seal the whole message like this. Omalhavien is a name attached to a threshold in the old Pauline map of time, the first hour of night. But in practice, for a modern seeker, it becomes something even more intimate. A reminder that the moment the sun sets, your inner world becomes louder, and you get to decide what you do with that volume. You can let your mind run you, or you can learn to read yourself, what it reveals, why it reveals it, and how to interpret what rises without getting pulled into paranoia, obsession, or we'll talk about the difference between intuition and anxiety, between symbolism and projection, between a genuine inner message and a nervous system that needs rest. And we'll keep it grounded, practical, and honest. Close with a line that gives them power. The night is not your enemy. The night is your teacher. Omalhavien is not a command. It is a door